So this week, I was going to have a continuation of the forward leg that we were working on the router bits last week. I've put out the order for those. They're going to take about 3 weeks to get in. But I started milling the legs and the aprons for the table. But as I was cutting out the legs, I switched it to video but forgot to hit record. So some of that I don't have recorded, but I've still got to do some ebony plugs on the ends and sides of the legs. So I'll be filming that, and next week we'll get that content out. Luckily for me, I was also filming content as I started building the Culbertson chandelier. So this is the Culbertson chandelier. It's a hexagon, pretty cool piece. This hangs in the Culbertson House. Got rafters coming out of the top, some little roof pieces, some different intricate pieces, a lot of ebony in it. So this is a pretty cool light. So I've started building this for Old California, and I was filming the process. So there's some cool stuff in this that we're going to be doing. So this will be probably a two-part. I've got a lot of the milling done and the cutting of the pieces, but we still have to assemble. So this will probably be a two-part video. So we'll have the one part where we get this stuff done, and then we'll have a second part where we assemble it and put it all together. So the rafters here go into mortises that are in the legs here. There's mortises on both sides of the rafter. So I've got one of the rafters here. So if we look at this, you can see there's a little mortise on both sides that's the shape of the roof, and those fit into that. So this fits into a mortise in the leg or the post, and then the roof fits into the mortises on both sides of it. So being a hexagon, the way you put it together, that'll be pretty interesting in the video when we get to it, because you got to put it together in a certain order and then get that last piece in, get those roof pieces in, and then slide that last rafter in to tie everything together. So this will be a cool build. We got this started, so you'll be seeing that. Yeah, like I said, it'll be a two-part video, maybe three, but I think we can probably do it in 2 parts. And then we'll also be having some videos come out with the forward table and what we're doing on that. We got the aprons cut for that, and I've got some content on that. And like I said, the legs are cut out, but we still need to put some ebony in one side of them in the ends. And then when the router bit comes, we still got to shape those, and then they're still going to be the top. The inlay that's in the top, that's going to be kind of proud and raised. So I'm working on figuring out the carving of those and how to keep those proud and do that. But that'll be a kind of a very cool thing. So we got some good content coming. Again, please like, subscribe, hit that bell down below to get the notifications. We really appreciate it. You're helping us out. So let's get out in the shop and get started. Hey everyone, so I just wanted to give you a little bit closer look at the fixture before we start getting into the cutting, because it was a little further out during the intro. So I just wanted you to see it here. So here you can see the rafters coming out of the posts. We've got our ebony plugs, we got our rails, we've got our roof piece here. So you can see the roof piece goes and it dados into the rafters that come out. So you can see the rafter here. So we've got to have the mortises on both sides of the rafter. So like I said, we'll be showing that in the video, how we get that into both sides. We come down again, then you can see bottom rail, again, ebony plugs. It's open right now, but there is a piece of glass that goes in the bottom here to cover that up, and then that glass lifts out so that the bulb can be changed. So here's the actual fixture. So I kind of put together a little mock-up here of the post that I've already cut, so you can see kind of how it goes together. So you can see here the post, there's another groove in the post here for that roof piece. So if you look back on the original one we have here, you can see this roof piece comes and sits flush against the upper rail, but the post here stands proud of the rail. So we've got to have a dado or a rabbet or whatever you want to call it, a groove into the post here so that the roof sits flush and then goes into our mortise in the rafter. So that's what we've got here. So on this side you can see where the roof piece goes into the mortise on the rafter. If we flip it around to the back, you can see I make it a little deep so that there's plenty of play and room to do that, because the mortise isn't in here yet, but the upper rail is going to be right along here. So then on this side, you can see how that groove is. So that groove's right there. You can see it lines up with the mortise in the rafter for the roof piece to go into. So in the next video, we'll be getting into putting in the mortises for the rails, because the rails have a tenon on each side. I think we've got one of those right here as well. So we've got my test samples that I keep. So we've got, this is the upper rail here. So this one I'm not doing loose tenons on, actually doing straight mortise and tenon. So you've got the tenons on the ends of, this is the lower rail here. So we've got our cloud lift in the bottom, got our glass pocket in the back, and our tenon on the ends. So we'll be getting into that in the next video of how we're making those. And we're good to go. Let's get to cutting. So here you can see we have the first parts of the mortises in the rafters. So what we have here is some index pins. The drawing gets centered in between two index holes, and we set that cutting path. And then what we do is flip the drawing 180 degrees and set up a new cutting path for the other side. So here we just flipped the part over with those indexing pins, and we're cutting out the mortises for the second side, as well as we will cut the final cutout of the piece there. So now you see we got the pieces here. The mortises are in there. It's cut out. You flip it over and you can see the mortises on the other side are perfectly lined up. So there's a little trick to being able to cut two-sided stuff on the CNC and have everything line up. So now we're going to go into our roof pieces. So you can see the profile is already cut into the roof pieces. I'll have a picture of the router bit up in the upper right-hand corner that I used for that profile. I forgot to hit the record button on that, so that profile was already into there. But here you can see we've got them all cut out, and those are the roof pieces that are going to go in and lock into our rafters. Next, we come over to our rails and we start cutting our rails out. Again, this is something you could do on the table saw and then cross-cut them with the sled or on the chop saw. But when I already have the CNC set up and going, it's pretty easy to cut these out, and you know that they're going to be all exactly square, exactly the same length, and exactly the same width. So it's easy to let the CNC come and cut these things out. Then we move on to our posts. As you can see, we already got that cross cut there. That's the piece that the back of the roof sits into on the post that I showed you a little bit ago. And then right now the CNC is cutting in the mortise, the deeper mortise that the rafters are going to actually sit into. So you've got that little portion of the groove that the back of the roof sits into, and then the part for the rafter. And then here we're coming back and cutting them out. And again, you can see everything's going to be the same length, same width, which especially makes it easier on these hexagons and these more complex shapes, that you know everything's going to line up because it's all the same size. So here we're over to the table saw, and what I'm doing here is cutting in the groove for the glass or the pocket. So in the back of these, there's going to be a little rabbet that the stained glass sits in. So cutting the first part here on the flat side, and then what we'll do is readjust the table saw, and we will flip those up on end and cut the other portion of it out. So here you see we flipped them up, and then you can see right there that pocket that the glass is going to set into. So here we're going to set the angle of the blade to cut the bevels on our posts to get that hexagon shape. So it's 60 degrees is what we need. So you can see we started out there at 90. We're at 60 here. My right hand is down on the adjustment, and I'm just adjusting it. And sometimes you can move the handle quite a bit, and it may not make a difference on the blade itself. So if you just kind of tap the blade there, you'll see that you have moved it over. It just didn't register on the gauge. So here we're cutting the first cut on these. So we're cutting a 60-degree cut on both sides. Then we'll come back and straighten the blade back up, and we'll make the second cut to get the shape that we need on these posts. So here we go through and we do both sides, flip it around, and we run the other side through. Then once we get all these, we'll get our little protractor gauge back out, put it on the blade, and we'll set the blade back to 90 degrees. So we got to run these through. And again, I've got more than 6 of these as well, especially having to do all the mortises for the ebony and everything else. So here we've set the blade back to 90 degrees, and then we run it through the 2 sides. And you can see here, we've got our shape on the front. We've got the little bevel on the front. You can see there where the rafter goes in. And then we go through and just run all these through again. Again, there are more than 6, but that's okay. That gives us the ability to screw something up. And if you've built furniture or anything else before, you know invariably you're going to screw something up. And for me, it's better to have extras ahead of time than it is to have to try and run a one-off and reset all of your saws and everything else, especially with something like this where I ran it through the CNC. To have to set up the CNC to run all this again would be a pain. So I always set it up to cut a couple extras when I'm doing it initially, so that we've got stuff to fix our mistakes. Then finally here, you'll see this is the piece for the ceiling. So the ceiling cap here, before we tilted it up, you could kind of see the ebony plugs and some of the other holes. We'll explain that in a second. And again, this is another 2-sided piece. The back of this has to have a pocket put into it for the electrical, the part that goes up to the ceiling. So the pocket that you're going to see routed into it here is the pocket that covers up the electrical box on the ceiling and gives some room for the wiring and stuff to be. So we've already cut the first side. Again, we centered it in between the indexing pins, put the indexing pins in, flipped it over, and here we are cutting out the pocket on the back side. So once this pocket's cut, the CNC will go and change bits to a 1/4 inch downcut bit, or I'm sorry, a combination bit that is going to cut out the actual shape, but it cuts up and down so that you don't get tear out on either side of your piece. It's called a compression bit. So there you can see the holes as it has pocketed out. So those holes that you see there are for the hooks that are going to bolt in for the hangers that the light hangs from, the metal wire hangers that the light hangs from. So there'll be some hooks that bolt in through there. So now we're cutting it out here. It's cutting the tabs there. So that's all cut out. Now it's going to move away. And we'll pop this up, and you'll be able to see on the other side there, you can see the ebony and those holes along with the center hole for the electrical to pass through. Hey everyone, thanks again for hanging out and watching the video. Hope you liked what you saw. Remember, if you have any questions about anything, please post them in the comments below and I'll answer them as quick as I can. I really appreciate you hanging out and watching the video. If there's anything that you need, please reach out, send a message, comment in the video. We'll get back to you as quick as we can. Look out for part 2. So remember, like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get the notification. We have part 2 coming up soon, and then we'll be having part 2 of the Ford table coming up as well. So keep an eye out for those videos coming up, and thank you so much for watching the videos and spending the time. We really appreciate you. Have a great day.